ever run the hybrid configuration wizard and thought, that's it, I'm set. Turns out that's just the beginning. Hidden beneath the wizard's simplicity are complex dependencies that can unravel your entire setup, and most admins miss them. Let's map out the real risks that can knock your hybrid coexistence offline, and how even minor settings in DNS or firewalls can create hours of invisible chaos. Are you sure you haven't missed a critical link? The invisible web, mapping hybrid exchanges into dependencies. If you've ever watched that green progress bar finish on the hybrid configuration wizard and thought your job was done, you're not alone. Most guides make hybrid look like a one-and-done project. Run the wizard, follow a checklist, and watch your users move seamlessly between on-prem Exchange and Office 365. But real-world hybrid Exchange is nothing like that. You're not just merging two systems, you're connecting webs of dependencies that run through your entire infrastructure, and if one piece frays, you'll spend the next week chasing unexplained outages. Hybrid isn't just a checkbox in a deployment guide. It's the intersection of Active Directory, Azure AD Connect, your on-prem Exchange servers, DNS, firewalls, and every Microsoft 365 service you want to use. Each piece brings its own quirks, and they don't all like to play nicely together. If you've got even one outdated pointer in DNS or a misconfigured firewall rule, you'll find out the hard way. Picture a string of holiday lights. If a single bulb burns out, the whole strand can go dark, and nobody tells you which bulb it is. Let's break down what gets tangled. You've got on-prem Active Directory holding user identities and a mountain of attributes that Azure AD Connect tries to keep in sync with Azure Active Directory. Your Exchange servers are still running locally, keeping routing and mailboxes in check, or at least trying to, as long as the right ports are open and attribute synchronization is running smoothly. Then you layer in Microsoft 365, which relies on its own set of trust relationships and expects legacy systems to keep up. What makes this web so fragile is how interactive it becomes. Miss a single sync interval with Azure AD Connect, and suddenly a mailbox will look like it's migrated, yet Outlook will stubbornly insist it has no idea who or where the user is. Or you tweak a DNS record for auto-discover. Maybe you're updating a certificate, maybe migrating a different service, and you don't realize someone else deleted an old MX entry that's still in use by legacy mail relays. No one notices until mail vanishes somewhere in the ether, or users wake up to blank Outlook profiles. I've seen admins skip attribute checks before running the wizard because everyone's in a hurry to see the hybrid complete banner. But then, out of nowhere, half the users start complaining that their mail's bouncing or their calendars have vanished. Dig a little deeper and you'll see something like the MSX mailbox guide never synced for a few straggler accounts. Everything else looked healthy, but that one small oversight cost hours of late-night troubleshooting and a lot of unhappy end users. DNS records are the unsung heroes of hybrid, but also some of the biggest sources of pain. Auto-discover, MX, SPF get even one of these wrong, and your mail will either disappear, endlessly loop, or get flagged as suspicious by every provider on the way. Think of your DNS records as the traffic cops of your mail system, pointing Outlook in the right direction for auto-discover, steering external mail traffic into your Exchange online environment, making sure messages don't get marked as spam en route. If auto-discover's SRV or CNAME prank calls the wrong server, Outlook spins its wheels and support calls start rolling in. Then you've got firewalls, and in hybrid, just open 443 doesn't cut it. Exchange Hybrid needs explicit rules for services like MRS proxy, Exchange web services, and even federation endpoints if you want features like free, busy, and mailbox moves to work. It's easy to forget a port or leave out an IP range, especially if firewall rules get managed by a separate team. That comes back to bite you later when mailbox moves fail with cryptic errors or calendar sharing just stops. MSHS proxy in particular loves to break if the right endpoints aren't reachable, and few things cause more confusion than a mailbox move failing on step 5 with nothing but a generic error message. None of these problems surface if everything is perfectly in tune, but let's be honest, the chance of every dependency being 100% in sync is slim if you haven't taken the time to map them out ahead of time. Hybrid Exchange isn't about running a wizard and moving on. It's about understanding that your Exchange, Active Directory, DNS, Firewall, and Microsoft 365 environments all need to work together. Ignore this web, and you're almost guaranteed invisible chaos. Support tickets for issues that don't seem related, hours wasted on why did free, busy stop working, and users who lose trust in IT because things just keep breaking. Here's the truth. The wizard doesn't validate your whole environment. It just wires up the connections you already have in place. If one attribute's out of sync or a DNS record is stale, you can get a success green light while mail silently goes missing for dozens of users. Document every dependency, test each integration, and never rely on the wizard alone to catch what matters. This is why mapping your hybrid environment's interdependencies before even launching a migration can save days of effort down the line. Nothing in hybrid is as simple as checking a box or running a script. It's the preparation and upfront mapping that stops you from chasing after bizarre, one-off issues that everyone dreads. Now, if you've ever wondered why something like FreeBusy only works one way or how mail routing can break for a single user even when everything else looks healthy, you're not alone. That's where sync and directory alignment take the spotlight. Sync or sync, the surprising power of directory and attribute alignment. It's always the lone straggler, right? You've moved dozens of mailboxes to the cloud without a hiccup, and suddenly a single user just refuses to budge. The error messages don't make things clearer. Exchange Admin Center tells you the move completed, but there's a quiet disaster brewing in the mailbox move logs. Mailbox Replication Service proxy spits out a cryptic error, or the move completes, but mail routes itself into thin air. There's a reason for this, and it sits in the fine print of directory synchronization, specifically which attributes actually made it from on-prem to Azure AD and Exchange Online. Here's where a lot of hybrid projects take a left turn. Administrators get excited to light up new features and start shifting people to Microsoft 365. They spin up Azure AD Connect, connect up the servers, and fire up the wizard, usually assuming that sync is just another step on the checklist. But if you ask anyone who's been around a few migrations, they'll tell you that checklist misses the details that matter. Azure AD Connect doesn't care about Exchange attributes specifically unless you tell it to. So while your user objects and passwords are moving to the cloud, the critical Exchange bits, think proxy addresses, legacy, Exchange DN, MSX mailbox guide, and the mail attribute might not be. Or, just as dangerous, they might be out of date by a few sync cycles. Think about what happens then. You've migrated a mailbox, but Exchange Online is missing MSX mailbox guide for that user. Now, when mail tries to route to its target, Exchange Online can't do the translation, so you end up with lost messages or NDRs for just a handful of affected users. You solve this for everyone else, but the legacy account still gets stuck because no one ever chased down why a single attribute failed to sync years back. It's not a wide-scale outage. It's that frustrating high-profile edge case. Usually the VIP, if the universe is being extra funny, the real problem isn't just missing attributes, it's timing. Azure AD Connect doesn't always run on your schedule, and if the delta sync lags or the synchronization interval is misconfigured, you could find yourself in a bizarre state where the on-prem directory and Azure AD show different realities. Let's say you kick off a mailbox migration in the cloud, but on-prem AD hasn't finished syncing the newest changes. Exchange Online marks the mailbox as cloud hosted, but Exchange on-prem still thinks it's local. The result is mixed routing, Outlook disconnects, and the classic, why does this only happen to some people? Help desk ticket. It's tempting to view hybrid attribute sync as an all or nothing event, but in practice, it's more like spinning plates. The plates you really want to keep spinning are mail, proxy addresses, MSX mailbox guide, and legacy Exchange DN. If even one drops, the flow between on-prem and cloud falls out of alignment. An admin might have inherited a directory where proxy addresses grew messy after years of mergers and domain changes, or MSX mailbox guide went missing for a set of legacy users. So those are the mailboxes that break, and they don't break cleanly. They trip errors that send you off on wild goose chases. Now, add in the layer of authentication. Cross-premises features like mailbox moves or EWS-based calendar lookups rely on OAuth trust. Certificates underpin that trust. If your on-prem Exchange certificate is expired or doesn't match what Exchange Online expects, every attempt to authenticate gets blocked, but the errors you see are vague. Users get authentication prompts, mailbox moves hang for hours, and no amount of wizard reruns will fix it until the certificate issue is addressed. It's amazing how brittle OAuth and trust can be. One certificate renewal missed over the summer, and suddenly every cross-premises feature collapses. Admins often assume the wizard will warn them about certificate mismatches or missing attributes, but the reality is the wizard assumes you've done that work up front. It's not auditing every attribute or watching your sync cycles for you. Azure AD Connect won't fix an improperly scoped sync unless you go back and include those Exchange attributes in your sync rules. By the time you see errors, it's after the outage has already started, and then you're digging through logs, cross-referencing GUIDs, and running PowerShell one-liners to figure out where the sync broke down. The real foundation for a solid hybrid is directory sync that's both frequent and complete. That means making sure the right users and the right attributes flow from your on-prem AD into Azure AD every single time. It also means watching for lag and verifying that every mailbox move is reflected in both directories before marking the project as done. Even after you've gotten things humming along, keep an eye on certificates and OAuth trust. They don't expire based on your migration timeline. They expire on their own, and when they do, the problems start quietly. If there's a single lesson here, it's that hybrid Exchange is only as healthy as your slowest sync. One delayed batch or neglected attribute, and you'll be chasing ghost errors long after your calendar says the project's finished. You can skip a step in the checklist, but you can't skirt around directory reality. Of course, none of this means much if users can't connect at all. Even with all the right attributes flowing and every trust relationship in place, auto-discover or mail routing can still grind to a halt with a single DNS typo. That's the next rabbit hole, where small changes in your network's records and perimeter rules can quietly break everything you just fixed elsewhere. DNS and firewall fog, when the smallest settings break everything. Auto-discover is one of those features you mostly forget about, until Outlook stops connecting for everyone, all at once. It works smoothly for months, even years, and then a subtle accident in DNS pushes your whole organization into crisis mode. It usually starts with a symptom, not a cause. Maybe half your users wake up to endless password prompts, or new mailbox moves suddenly won't start, even though nothing major was supposed to have changed. If you dig into the details, the issue almost always points back to a record that drifted, a copy-paste mistake, or a change that never got documented. In hybrid Exchange, DNS and firewall configs are the equivalent of oxygen. You never notice them until something clamps down and users start gasping. What makes this even trickier is how much of these settings most admins inherit. Networks evolve, folks come and go, and DNS zones get layered with years of temporary changes that become permanent by accident. Take internal DNS. Auto-discover and MX records can sometimes be different from what you publish to the internet. You forget which copies are authoritative, then a secondary zone kicks in and the wrong SRV record starts answering queries. It's the kind of thing you don't learn from a deployment guide. You only learn from a full inbox and frantic calls from your help desk. Then there's firewalls. The default thinking is usually just to make sure 443 is open and call it safe for the cloud. But Exchange Hybrid depends on very specific paths staying open, because mailbox moves, free, busy, and calendar sharing don't all use the same endpoints. MRS proxy needs its own inbound access, often to a dedicated set of URLs. Exchange Web Services has its own requirements. You also can't skip federation endpoints if you want to maintain a seamless calendar across on-prem and cloud. Miss one set of ports or misconfigure an RT rule, and you'll end up with mailbox moves hung at 10% and no clear error, or with cross-premises calendar lookups timing out for some users but not others. Firewalls rarely block everything, they just block enough to cause confusion. Let's talk about minor records with major impact. Think SPF, for example. At a global enterprise I worked with, everything ran well for months, until someone noticed that a new cloud email security product was missing from the SPF include list. Suddenly, thousands of legitimate outbound mails from certain regions started bouncing as spam or went missing into junk folders. Even worse was when MX records pointed to the wrong server after a decommissioning swimming mail in circles between legacy exchanges. The support logs lit up overnight, but no one noticed the root problem for days because every other hybrid connection test still appeared to work. Those little DNS settings are invisible until they're wrong, and then they're the only thing you can see. Auto-discover, MX, SPF, and if you're running DKIM, those TXT records as well. Each plays a unique role. Auto-discover makes or breaks Outlook profile creation. Miss a name or SRV, and Outlook won't find the mailbox, even if everything is perfect elsewhere. MX records decide whether your mail delivers to Microsoft 365 or keeps looping through an old on-prem relay. SPF and DKIM are now baseline requirements for trusted mail. Get them wrong, and you create spam or phishing nightmares. One overlooked underscore in your DKIM selector means external mail will be flagged as suspicious. You're not just setting these records once, you need regular audits, especially after any change to mail routing or hybrid configuration. Firewalls come into play even after you pass those green checks in the hybrid wizard. Everyone focuses on HTTPS and port 443, but EWS, MRS proxy, and federation endpoints often require explicit exceptions or ranges to be open. Whitelisting entire Microsoft data centers isn't practical for every org, so you end up with surgical rule sets. All it takes is someone revoking or tightening an old rule, perhaps during a security push or hardware refresh, and suddenly nobody can move mailboxes, or users lose the ability to share free, busy info. These are not always outright blocks either. Some firewalls rate limit or deep inspect traffic, introducing strange delays or sporadic failures that are brutal to troubleshoot. Then there's Exchange Online Protection, or EOP, a layer most people forget until something goes haywire. EOP can enforce policies that block mail from your on-prem servers if those servers send outside the documented connectors or fail transport layer security checks. Policy drift in EOP or just a missed update can lead to mail loops or internal messages getting routed out and then rejected on arrival. The really painful part is that EOP warnings are rarely clear. Sometimes the only evidence is missing mail or a growing NDR queue. By that point, your users already think the system is permanently broken. All of this highlights a simple truth. Hybrid Exchange isn't mainly about the cloud or about running the wizard without errors. The mail flow connectivity and hybrid benefits ride completely on these background settings. DNS records and firewalls are the silent referees. They don't whistle until after the play's gone wrong, and then the chaos has already started spreading into every corner of the business. So even if every migration report looks green and your mail seems to flow, keep in mind that one undetected change in DNS or firewall config can bring your hybrid setup to a crawl. And when everything else seems fine but free busy only works one way, the answer almost always sits deeper, somewhere in the trust relationships and underlying authentication. That's what needs checking next. The trust problem. Why free, busy, and authentication fail when everything seems fine? Let's talk about the classic case where everything checks out. Mail flow is steady, directory sync is clean, AutoDiscover is returning the right results, and users are happily logging in. But then someone tries to check a calendar from on-prem to the cloud, and free, busy just gives up. This is the scenario that always confuses teams because on the surface, nothing is broken. All those system dashboards show green lights. Yet, this is the point when hybrid exchange reveals its most fragile layer, trust. In hybrid, trust isn't about giving Microsoft your blessing to move some mail. It's literally how the two environments decide what they're willing to share. Federation trust and OAuth authentication make up the core bridge between on-prem Exchange and Exchange Online. These are not things you tick off during a one-time setup. These relationships evolve, expire, and can drift out of alignment if you're not paying attention. Unlike DNS typos or obvious firewall blocks, trust issues lurk beneath the surface. They're dynamic, not static, and that makes them easy to break and hard to notice. Here's what usually happens. Cross-premises, free busy works just fine from the cloud to on-prem, but try it the other way and the experience falls apart. Admins often head down the DNS rabbit hole one more time, double-checking endpoint records and firewall rules, convinced something simple must be blocking access. Most of the time, though, the culprit sits with federation trusts, namely the certificate that holds them together or an OAuth setting that's out of sync. You can inspect DNS and port rules for hours and never get closer to the real fix. Take a real-world example, a global org where everything had run well since hybrid went live. Then, with almost no warning, cloud users could no longer see on-prem calendars. Nothing else changed, no new firewall policies, no DNS edits, no apparent outages. After digging deep, the team found that the Federation Trust Certificate on the on-prem Exchange server had quietly expired the week before. Renewal emails had landed in an old distribution list, and there was no alert in the Exchange admin centers. As soon as they renewed the trust and updated the certificate, calendar sharing sprang back to life. This kind of silent expiration is more common than you'd think. OAuth is another common landmine. Even with solid directory and connectivity, cross-prem authentication depends on carefully scoped OAuth settings and application IDs. Let the wrong ID expire or adjust the wrong permission, and suddenly Mailbox moves, EWS-based calendar sharing, and even mobile device access start failing in bizarre, inconsistent ways. What makes it tough is the way OAuth failures pop up. Users see random credential prompts, background jobs, timeout, but nothing really useful hits the error logs. It's easy to mistake this for a temporary glitch or user error, when in reality, a misalignment in trust has quietly severed communication between environments. Let's make sense of how all this glues together. Federation trusts in Exchange Hybrid allow both sides to exchange availability information, calendars, resource booking, and so on. Think of Federation as the gatekeeper. It validates requests and, assuming everything checks out, lets the asking server peek at calendars in a different environment. If the Federation trust or its supporting certificates are invalid, expired, or wrongly scoped, those classic free busy features become a black hole. Meanwhile, OAuth is the handler for actual authentication behind features like mailbox migrations and EWS connections. It issues tokens and manages the handshake between on-prem and cloud services. If your OAuth app registration gets out of sync, or if the certificate backing the relationship expires, you'll see a drop-off in mailbox moves or EWS-based features. The systems won't even always throw helpful logs, sometimes a generic error, sometimes nothing. The sneaky part is how one change or expiration can ripple across both environments. Swap out the Federation certificate on-prem, but forget to re-establish trust from the cloud side, and you'll see intermittent failures, maybe for some users, maybe just for certain features. Or update an OAuth app registration in Azure, but never reflect that change on-prem. And mailbox moves start failing with cryptic references to authentication issues that weren't there before. These aren't problems you can chase with a network trace or a PowerShell one-liner. Ghost errors like this leave little evidence. Support logs don't light up. Users just notice key hybrid perks are gone. This is why trust relationships are the silent backbone of hybrid exchange. They rarely break loudly. Instead, they fade out, often after a delayed change, a certificate expiry, or an overlooked configuration update. When you ignore these connections, even the best-laid hybrid projects start unraveling at the edges. The most seamless hybrid coexistence always comes down to regular review, actually checking that certificates are still valid, trusts are still lined up, and OAuth is working the way you expect. If anything, the reality is that hybrid success demands just as much attention after launch as it does pre-migration. Schedule reviews of trust and OAuth settings, add reminders for certificate renewals, and don't assume a green dashboard means you're safe. As the last piece slips out of sync, features go quiet and user trust evaporates with them. With all these invisible gears at work, the real lesson behind configuring hybrid exchange comes sharply into focus. It was never about the wizard at all. If you've been burned by the just run the wizard advice, you already know the real work starts with understanding what keeps hybrid exchange stable, mapping out all those connections, directory sync, DNS, firewall rules, trust configs. Pays off when you're not spending weekends untangling mysteries. Test every assumption, not just the ones the wizard checks. The green check marks are more like suggestions than guarantees. The next time you see a minor attribute or a DNS entry, take a second look. The one small detail you skip could be waiting to turn into the next company-wide outage.